Welcome to the Binmucker podcast. Thanks for taking some time to watch today's episode number 32. Today's guest is my freshman year roommate, Kevin Quisumbing. Hell of a kid. Was a great defensive end for the Tufts Jumbos. Hell of a shot putter. Wasn't so great at Madden football, but love this kid to death. Really glad I got to have him on the pod today. We discussed a variety of topics such as loving yourself, the Federal Reserve, Bitcoin, the importance of self-sovereignty, if you will, making your own choices, and a bunch of other stuff. I'm going to start putting Google Forms in these episodes so you can tell me what you like, disliked, and what I can improve upon. And I hope you enjoy today's content. Thanks again for watching. Today, we welcome Kevin Quisumbing back to the Binmucker podcast, the man who encouraged me to start a podcast. How are we doing today, Q? Thanks for coming on.
Doing good. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So first topic of the day. Yesterday, I watched The Big Short with my girlfriend. Great movie for those who haven't seen it, about the housing bubble collapse of 2008. And yesterday, I learned that all new money printed or issued is debt. So essentially, when by debt, when you take out a mortgage or you go and get a loan to buy a car, the banks, and I might get this a little wrong. I'm not an expert. I don't work in finance. But as I understand it, essentially all new money issued is just debt, which is kind of a crazy concept. And when a bunch of people go out and take on debt that they can't pay back, like in the example of a bunch of people getting mortgages, they had no way to pay back. It can lead to a bubble, and then we can see a financial meltdown or collapse like we saw where the banks, who ironically enough got us into the situation, trying to wrap all these mortgages into a financial instrument, inevitably made these mortgage-backed bonds. I think they packaged them with a bunch of shit mortgages that inevitably failed, and everyone thought there's no way housing fails. It's too strong. It's constantly growing up and to the right. But inevitably, it got to the point where houses were becoming more of a liability than an asset because the prices were inflating so much, people couldn't pay it back. I thought it was pretty crazy to learn that essentially all new money issue nowadays is just dead. And what happens when we don't see profit or growth, or what happens when we don't see more and more growth?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of where my head was going right when you were speaking was like, maybe this was that whole crash was the reason why we all got so afraid of debt. Because I don't know about you, but all my family is trying to avoid it, right? Like everybody down from my grandma to one of my cousins that is about to go to college. Like for some reason, there's this inherent fear of debt, and I think that's unfounded. I think it's just like debt is just a reality of where we are financially. Like if you want to get more money, if you want to unlock another level of your life, you're probably going to have to go through debt somehow. Right. I mean, what I want to dive into a little bit more, I think not just for me, but for anyone who's listening, is like, what do you mean when you say another dollar printed is debt?
Yep. So essentially, and the movies I've watched did a much better job explaining this than I probably will here. But as I understand it, when, say, for example, I needed $100 to buy a car. Obviously, nowadays, $100 can't buy you a car, but theoretically, let's say 100 could. So I come to you and I say, Kevin, let's say Kevin's a central bank. I say, Kevin, I need $100 to buy this car. You don't actually, you essentially issue me $100, and then over the course of the life, the bank holds a piece of paper that says I will receive $100 and let's say $5 back, because we can say the interest rate is $5. So the bank now holds a piece of paper that says I have $105, or I will be receiving $105 at the end of this loan. So they'll make $5. But then what happens sometimes is now I got that $100, I go buy the car, but the bank turns around and sells my debt to another person. So now the bank gets money, so they get $100. And then that other person now has a receipt that says, I'm going to get $105 from Connor. And you now just got essentially that debt paid, and that other person has it. And that goes like, this is a very small example, but that goes on at a
Okay.
massive scale, if that makes sense.
And this is how the banks are making money, right?
Exactly. So the bank, like if I deposit $100 in the bank, they're going to go and loan $97 and keep, say, $3. Now this happens in the hundreds of millions. So it's not like there's always a run on the ATM, because there is still, you can go and get out cash. But you think if like you put a shit ton of money in the bank doesn't actually hold that money. They lend it out in the form of debt to other people who need money, and then they charge an interest on it. And when they over leverage themselves, they give too much debt out, and they don't hold enough cash on hand if there's a run on the bank or something. Nowadays, we're FDIC insured and stuff, but FDIC insured up to $250,000. But that's kind of the problem when too many banks are doing that. And does that kind of make sense? Is there anything I could do?
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. That I have a feeling like this is going to go into Bitcoin really quickly. But the first thing is just pointing out that debt is how these banks are making money. Just proves how much debt or being leveraged helps you make money. If the banks are using debt themselves they're using your debt, right? But they're using debt to actually gain more income. Then this is a way for us to do it as well, right? There's no reason for just the wealthy or the elite to just keep on using debt in order to get a better lifestyle for themselves or unlock more income for themselves. This is something that for us to do as well, if we aren't scared. I feel like we do have that inherent fear still, probably coming from this 2008 crisis.
Yeah, keep in mind, anyone anon listening, this is not financial advice. Neither of us is financial experts, but I think you bring a great point, and I think it's very key that if people are looking to do something like this, they don't overextend or over leverage themselves. But I completely agree, man. I don't think very many people realize that when they take out a loan, the bank is just issuing new money, new debt that they're going to be paid back even more on top of in most cases. And it's a little more complicated than that. Like, I understand it's really the Federal Reserve, the private bank of the United States, that is doing something with bonds of countries. Like, and it's essentially they have so much power by being given that control. And I think very few people realize that they have this power and this is the way it works. And they just assume that all their money in their checking account is actually sitting there in the bank, when in reality, the bank's lending it out to make money. And the more I've gone and learned about how our banking system works, like, I understand why they set it up that way. But the Federal Reserve is actually a private bank. It's not even really a government entity. It's like a sister of the government. And the reason the Fed was created is because there were so many different notes across the states. And they needed one organization that could have like that monopoly on money and make it fungible across the states so people could interchange freely. It's not like, I live in New England and you live in Georgia. If there wasn't the Fed and I had my New England dollar and I came and visited you in Georgia, it might not be worth shit down there. So I understand why we need the Fed. But I think when you really take the time to learn about it, at least myself personally, I've become so convinced that Bitcoin is such a better bet because it's money not backed by any central party, but instead backed by open source software and energy, if you will, to secure the blockchain, make sure that no one can tamper with it. And it's a fixed supply. You can go and audit the money supply. Good luck auditing the Fed. Like, I don't know if it's ever been done successfully. I'm really not sure. It just seems like a more honest, open, transparent system that anyone can participate in, that it doesn't matter how much money you have. Your Bitcoins are going to be there. It's not like the central bank of Bitcoin or Satoshi Nakamoto, its creator, who no one's found, is out there. The second you buy Bitcoin with your fiat currency, it's not like someone is then turning around and lending your Bitcoin out. You can do that. There are services that you can generate yield on your Bitcoin, but that's risky. But in our traditional banking system, you don't even have a say. You deposit money at your traditional bank, they are going to go lend that money out, and then they'll give you 0.01%, which isn't even coming close to beating the rate of inflation, which is...
And man, this is like almost the theme of the whole like Web3 push almost, or what I've been seeing is like gaining control, retaking control of your data or your money, right? In this way, if you had all your money in crypto, the way you can like lend it out and all that. And it's really interesting when we're able to actually kind of retake the control rather than depending on all these middlemen and just trusting them. Like, I mean, that's the biggest thing I think that you mentioned is like the importance of trust, not on this podcast, but in a previous talk. Like, I really do believe like this whole thing is based on trust. And if I just take a poll as to how many people trust the government right now, I feel like we're pretty low levels, maybe even lower when Trump was president, but we're still at very low levels of just trusting the government. And even though the Federal Reserve is separate from the government, I'm sure because we view them as part of the government, we also have a little trust on them. So when we have all these different emotions, why would I stay with something that I don't trust when there's an option just as secure, if not more, where I can just do it better and I don't have to rely on these people that I don't trust?
Yeah, I think you bring up such a key point about trust. And I will say that I think it's important to distinguish Web3 from Bitcoin. And while I am excited about some of the things Web3 claims to bring its users, I think Bitcoin is really the only truly decentralized one. And while I do use some Web3 things, I think I read a great piece by this guy named Moxie, who is the founder of the Signal app. I'll link it in this video. I'll put up a little thing so people can see a picture. But he talked about how, ironically enough, in Web3, like we'll take, for example, OpenSea, biggest NFT marketplace right now, right? It's blowing up. And then MetaMask, which is a wallet used in the web browser. And when you use your MetaMask wallet to buy an NFT on OpenSea, what you're really doing is essentially, at least the way Moxie explained it in his paper, is having MetaMask API, so application program interface, talk with OpenSea's API, and then you essentially kind of get the NFT put on the blockchain. And in the code, it's like a URL that links to something. And then technically, depending on whose server or whose computer, the cloud, there really is no cloud. It's just someone else's computer. Who's ever storing that NFT, they could, if theoretically, kind of adjust the image and change it. So even though you own on the blockchain the right to that URL, which directs you to your NFT, if you don't self-host or store that NFT server, someone could kind of mess with it, and you have to trust that OpenSea won't. And well, I think there's a lot of exciting stuff about Web3. I think it's important to realize that how much different is that from our current system, where we just have to trust that the banks will make the changes on their internal ledgers when we go out and spend our money or put it on a credit card, or whereas Bitcoin, I mean, it's on the blockchain, like, and only you with your private key can access those funds. And it's more responsibility, because if you lose your private key, it's not like you can go, excuse me, Mr. Bitcoin CEO, I want my Bitcoin back. You're just shit out of luck. Whereas at a bank, you know, if something happens, it's like, hey, my money got fucked with. Yeah, it's FDIC insured. The bank goes under. You're good up to $250,000. So there's disadvantages and advantages to each. And some things I personally like about Web3, I like USDC coin, US dollar coin. I use my Coinbase debit card. USDC is a stable coin built on Ethereum's platform. I use my Coinbase debit card, and I actually get cashback rewards in crypto, which is kind of cool. I like the idea that I can buy binmucker.crypto as a domain name. And I think maybe in the future, it'll be easier to identify my wallet, and I can put my Bitcoin and whatnot address in there. And then people, rather than having to paste my public key, they can just look up my, binmucker.crypto, send me Bitcoin that way if they ever wanted to. And they still have a ton to do. And like I said, I think there are some cool use cases, some cool companies, but I don't think any of them are as decentralized as people claim they are in a lot of cases. And like you said, it's better in some ways because you can get some of that upside, but the VCs are the ones who are going to see tremendous upside in Web3. And I think Bitcoin is like the GOAT, the true decentralized one, whereas Ethereum's cool and a lot of coins are built on it. But Ethereum got hacked because of a smart contract, and they literally just forked the blockchain and rolled back and act like it didn't happen. And that could never happen in Bitcoin if, the longest chain is the correct chain. And I think it's very important to make those distinctions, because I think a lot of people who just don't understand or don't take the time to do the research will end up buying a lot of Web 3.0 shit coins, and then they might tank or whatever. And then a lot of people get a bad taste in their mouth. And it's unfortunate because even though Bitcoin is down like 40% from the all-time highs of 69K, I'm still eager to buy more every day, and I'm not worried in the slightest. Like Matter of fact, I'm happy it's kind of down because it's like, oh, I can get Bitcoin for cheaper. Like I can stack a whole Bitcoin quicker than I might have thought. Like,
yeah, no, I mean, we were in that group chat, like same. I don't know, maybe it's a general distaste for like all the finance bros, but I really do think we're getting to this new place where like all the different analytics and charts and all that are kind of getting thrown out the fucking window. And people are just buying things to buy things. So at the end of the day, when I look at the whole like crypto space, I just think about like which one's the biggest brand, which one is the brand that is gonna like, which one's Coca-Cola, right? In the soda brand industry, like which one's gonna be the one that's gonna be forever, evergreen, right? And I don't see anyone. I mean, I definitely see Bitcoin, right? And then maybe Ethereum. You want to say that's like the Pepsi of the of the soda industry. But I'm like throwing out all the ideas behind like supply and demand and all that, even though you could build a very strong case behind Bitcoin, specifically on supply and all these other different levers. But the one thing that kind of like got me really interested in this whole crypto sphere is people or all the videos that I kept watching started pointing to Austrian economics rather than traditional economics, the Keynesian economics. And it was like in the economics that we learned at Tufts and in college, right, and even in high school, we're always taught about the machine. Like this is how the economy works and functions. If you raise interest, right, this happens. Blah 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 blah. Like up down up down. You remember drawing those little arrows. Like that's cool, and I think that applies in the stock market. I think it still applies in our economy. But when we start going to the crypto space, Austrian economics is more built on the emotions between you and me. The idea of FOMO is actually like a big part of the Austrian economic philosophy.
Can we clarify a little bit for the audience and myself, because I actually just botched this explaining to my dad. Austrian economics is kind of when you value things on a subjective value. So what worth is it to me? Whereas Keynesian is trying to a degree to use the market to value something, right? Like, I'm going to botch that.
No, the biggest, honestly, like the way I had it explained to me, and this is we're probably both a little bit right and a little bit wrong. But I think the way that I view it is the understanding of a machine versus understanding of people. And I feel like even when we were in college, they try to make that statement that like economics is kind of a way to observe behaviors. And I think that's true to an extent. But when I look at Austrian economics, we have a little bit heavier like interest in like philosophy. And I think with Austrian economics, or as it pertains to cryptocurrency, the biggest thing is like, I mean, I couldn't even say it's just value to me, because I mean, it's not perceived value. It's not just perceived value to me. It's perceived value by all the other people that are posting on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. Like those all contribute to my perception of its value. So it's not just solely my perception of its value. You know what I mean? It's almost like I said, that FOMO of like, damn, everyone else is making millions, thousands, whatever you want to say, just buying this NFT. Damn, I kind of want to buy an NFT. Like, I think that applies to every single cryptocurrency.
Yeah, I think it's very important to realize that humans will typically take the path of least resistance. That most of the time people don't give a shit about the technology. They will FOMO into things. They will do irrational stuff. They will follow the crowd for better or worse. That Moxie guy talked about in his analysis of Web 3.0, that most people don't want to run their own server. I don't completely agree with that. I actually spun up my own server to run a Bitcoin node because I kind of took the time to do research and looked into it. But I do think he has some validity that the majority of people just aren't going to take the time to learn, aren't willing to spin up their own server, and will continue to just be advertised to constantly and have the AI get better and better at recommending, because that's kind of the trade-off. If you don't run your own server, I'll say it again, there is no such thing as the cloud. It's just someone else's computer or massive server in the case of Facebook, Google, Amazon, the likes. And when you realize all those things, I think that's why you see, and Bitcoin is also determined by game theory, but I think why you saw such crazy price action in a lot of shit coins, if you will, is because the Fed pushed so many people out on the risk curve with the massive amount of quantitative easing, as the finance bros like to call it, which is more or less a fancy term to say printing money, or as pop culture has deemed it, money printer go burr. So it's just kind of like, it's hard to position yourself when there's so many things vying for our attention and so many different financial tools or things you can buy. But for me personally, and I do see that other people see value in it, and that's why Bitcoin has value. But as I've gone down the rabbit hole, I see that Bitcoin is something that can't be manipulated. Like you said, it's got a fixed supply, so there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins, like 100 million Satoshis, one Bitcoin. There will only ever be 21 million, actually less because of the lost Bitcoin and the Bitcoin and Satoshi's wallet that has not moved and hopefully never does move. I don't think it will. And Bitcoin is something that it's like, it just, to this point at least, it cannot be manipulated. Ethereum, like I said, the Ethereum Foundation rolled back the blockchain and just chose to ignore when they got hacked for that amount. And that's something that's not, that just, if that happened to Bitcoin, it would really lose the majority of its legitimacy. So that's personally why I value Bitcoin so much more than these other coins. And
how did Ethereum get hacked? I haven't heard about that.
So I actually watched some doc. I think it was called, what was the documentary called? I watched Cryptopia, and then I think the second one by the same guy who made Cryptopia, both on YouTube for free, both great docs. I'll put the titles in here after the fact when I edit it. And in the second one, the guy was saying, because Ethereum is essentially, it's like Bitcoin in a way. It's different, obviously. But one thing that a lot of developers like about Ethereum is that you can write smart contracts on it. And with Taproot, you kind of can in Bitcoin now, but it's much easier to write smart contracts on Ethereum. It's much more programmable to kind of do what you want. And I don't know the technical details, but as I understand it, someone wrote a smart contract that allowed them to essentially bypass and take Ethereum, bypass like the vault, if you, or bypass. Okay. It allowed them to steal Ethereum from the smart contract. So the Ethereum developer said, oh shit, we can't have that. They hard forked the blockchain. Now you got Ethereum Classic, which is like the actual OG Ethereum. And then you have Ethereum by the people like Vitalik and the likes developing it. And like I said, man, I use US dollar coin. I have some Ethereum staked on Coinbase. Like I have a tiny bit, but the more I learn, the more I'm getting out of shit coins and going mostly into Bitcoin. Just because I think it's the most pristine. And back to kind of what I was talking about, like people don't want to run their own servers. People opt for centralized stuff because it makes their life easier, the path of least resistance. And I worried that if ETH, and I don't think it will, but if ETH were ever to become a global reserve currency, it wouldn't be that much different from what we have now, in the sense that powers would become centralized, not decentralized. They would become centralized in Ethereum over time. And the people who held the majority of it could start to do some funky stuff if they deemed it necessary. And as long as Bitcoin has proof of work and quantum computing doesn't come along, and at that point, maybe we could do something even more harder to break than SHA-256. We could do an even more powerful hash function that quantum computers couldn't break. It's just,
I'm gonna be completely honest with you, bro. You're way over my head. I'm getting lost.
I've been watching this MIT course for free called Blockchain and Money, taught by Gary Gensler, the head of the SEC. And I'm not going to lie, on social media, he gets portrayed as a bad guy for not releasing the Bitcoin spot ETF. And while I think he needs to release a Bitcoin spot ETF, Gary Gensler is genuinely a brilliant man. His lectures are incredible. And the more I learn about the technical details, like I said, this isn't financial advice. Everyone do your own research. But me personally, I'm becoming more and more convinced there is Bitcoin and there is everything else. And even the second best Ethereum is not close to the true decentralization Bitcoin has. And I think at the end of the day, that's what's so key about what cryptocurrencies can do. For all the FUD spread, it's incredible that anyone in the world can log onto the network. It doesn't give a shit about your race. It doesn't give a shit about what the laws are in your jurisdiction. The code is law. And if you take the time to learn and protect your private keys, and even if, it drops 40% from all-time highs, one Satoshi is still worth one Satoshi. if you're exchanging with others. And there's a lot of places around the world where people's financial currency is hyperinflated. And honestly, we're both very lucky to have the US dollar as the world reserve currency, because we benefit the most from that, being users of the US dollar. And I think while Bitcoin is a great store of value for us, I think for a lot of people across the world, it's an incredible medium of exchange, one they desperately need, and one that I think will continue to be adopted across the world, and hopefully will never be hacked or have someone do a 51% attack. And I think to do the exercise of like, all right, what coins are going to be here in 100 years? Will Ethereum be here? Maybe. I mean, I don't, but I can confidently say I think the chances Bitcoin will be here are in like the 99%, like very, very likely probability that Bitcoin will be here in 10, if not 100 years from now.
I agree.
Yeah, so I do go down the rabbit hole sometimes. It is fun. Like, not everyone goes down the rabbit hole, and then like, I don't know. Sometimes I think I have convinced my grandfather and dad to look into it, but I do the same thing. Sometimes I'll start talking and they'll just like stare at me with blank eyes and be like, I don't know what you just said, but I'm glad you're taking the time to learn. Like, why didn't you stop me? Why didn't you ask me? Like, what? So if there's anything I can be more clear about, please do let me know.
Yeah, I mean, that's what an interesting way to host a podcast. Let me ramble, and then can you ask me questions? Can you ask? What an interesting way.
When we start talking about Bitcoin, I can't not go down the rabbit hole. Like Baker said, I can bring any convo back to Bitcoin.
Oh my gosh, yeah, no, you're staying true to that. No, man, honestly, like I really do believe, like you sent me that link to the course, so I need to take that. I think it's really interesting. I need to cut out time, because it's like I think I've told you this multiple times already, and I told most of my friends about this also. Like, anytime I hear you getting started about Bitcoin, it really does feel like, one, like, holy shit, there's a lot. I feel like I'm drinking water out of the fire hose. But then two, it really does feel like feels like I'm on a freeway riding a horse. Like, God damn, this guy's speeding past me. I need to get in. I need to learn how the hell to get a car. So that's how I feel.
I just got the image of you riding a horse on the freeway, like, fuck off, buddy.
Jesus Christ,
cars, like,
slow down.
So tell me, I do go down the rabbit hole too much, and I'm so hopeful for the freedoms it can provide, but I think it's important to remember, as great as Bitcoin is, Bitcoin can't feed me. Bitcoin can't, at this point, pay my rent because they fucking take checks. So I still have my legacy bank. So I'd love to hear, what are some things that you're doing to kind of stay happy and stay healthy during, it's been unprecedented times these past 2 years, and a lot of, let's just say, incompetence from our leaders.
No, hey, slow down, Jeff. You're about to go back down the rabbit hole. But first of all, I think the biggest thing that I've been doing, the biggest habit that I've built, at least in the past, I think it was like 7 months. I started going to therapy again back in May. Therapy, like literally kind of this mindfulness journey. I'll even put therapy into mindfulness. But what it's taught me is, like, whenever you have those angers or you're just disgruntled about what's going on around you in the world, all that, it's always tied down to your lens. It's always tied down to things that happen in your life. So, like, what I mean is, all your past experiences, all your past behaviors build a lens by which you actually view the world. So anytime you're angry, anytime you're looking at something outside of yourself and being like, oh, I hate that shit. Oh, that's a big pet peeve. We can trace that back. If we want to, we can trace that back and understand, why am I feeling this way? And once we understand that, once we actually get through and make that real decision, once we see all the facts as to whether or not these behaviors are healthy or not, then we can start experiencing a fuller life. This is almost a cliche of mine now. The goal that's always happened ever since I started going to therapy has been to live a fuller life. If we get caught into these very negative, hateful mindsets, we get kind of closed off to all the other possibilities, all the other ways of viewing the world. If we're just kind of talking and building this little, echo chamber of just people that agree with us, or people that are just as angry as we are, then we don't get exposed to all the other ways of looking at the world. So that's been the biggest thing for me, to actually go to therapy, gain that mindfulness, and focus in on myself to better understand the world, rather than actually just going in and getting angry and jumping to conclusions all the time.
Man, that's such a good point. I think there are a lot of cases where our preconceived biases about things can help us, from dangerous situations to doing things right. But I think there's also a lot of situations where your preconceived biases and your agenda, if you will, can get you into a lot of hot water if you don't take the time to understand where people are coming from. One thing that I've been recently struggling a lot to understand, and I'm not sure I will understand, I'm not sure their motives are just or right, if you will. But seeing like Canadian's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau call unvaccinated people racist and misogynistic, seeing the French president, I don't want to misquote him, but he said something along the lines of like the unvaccinated shouldn't even be like they're less than kind of. He wants to make their life a pain. And I had a great conversation with my mom this morning, who's a pharmacist. And we just kind of talked about it. She's like, I do worry that you're going down the echo chamber too far. You're going down this school of thought. And it is kind of hand in hand with Bitcoin, of course, because fiat money, there's a shit ton of investors in big pharma and the mainstream media. There's a lot of money at stake. And if they get it wrong, they spent a lot of money on getting these vaccines out. And I think it's a great feat of science. Like, I am not anti-vaccine in the slightest. I think it's great that we have vaccines. I just worry that any time in history when a group of, let's call them elites, if you will, leaders, are urging and demonizing those who aren't willing to follow them. And, I saw an article today by Reuters talking about how mass formation psychosis isn't a thing. And Reuters is owned by the same company that owns Pfizer. It just seems like there's a clear agenda being pushed. And while I am I think it's great there's vaccines, I am super anti-mandate. I think everyone has the right to decide what they put in their own body. I don't think governments should be given the choice to force health procedures, if you will, onto the population, even in emergency situations like you could call the pandemic. And so I'd love, to your point, like, my preconceived biases and my past experiences and talking with others have definitely hindered or positioned my point of view in a certain way. So I'd really love to understand better kind of their side. And I told my mom I was like, please, Mom, send me more stuff like pro-vaccine so I can get a better grasp of the other side. To your point, man, I think it's so important to realize that everyone's agenda is just a result of, in part, their DNA, and in part the experiences they've had their entire life. And the quicker you realize that, I think the biggest realization I had as an adult was that everyone else is just trying to figure it out, and no one truly knows the answers. And that's a hard thing to come by.
Yeah, one of my friends, or what was it? So two things. In Atlanta specifically, it's actually a pretty like solid mix of people that really, really care about the vaccine and people that really, really don't give a fuck. And I like that. I like having both those sides. And of course, some people sprinkle on the middle, but like having that mixture of perspective. So one, I have one friend who's super, super into the vaccine, right? And personally, I think it's everything. Everybody has to decide for themselves. There are different risk factors on either way. I'm vaccinated, but at the same time, I would never want you to be, right? It feels weird for me to implore that you should be vaccinated. That feels weird. I don't want that control. I don't try to think that I have that control because I don't believe I do. So when I was journaling about a conversation that we had, there was a moment where she brought up how she couldn't believe I just got vaccinated this month. She was like, she couldn't believe that I got vaccinated just this month. And I was like, well, started spewing off a bunch of stats, a bunch of reasons, a bunch of things to justify my actions. And I was journaling the next morning, and the question, I used the Daily Stoic Journal. The question was, do my outbursts ever better a situation? Does my outburst ever, my outburst ever help my life? Am I ever very happy or proud that I had an outlash of emotionally driven words, stats, or what you may. And I talked about that moment. I wrote about that moment. I was like, honestly, no. Like, did we get anywhere in that conversation? She stated her perspective proudly, and it was very clear that she wasn't willing to move. And then I responded the same way, proudly, showing that I'm stubborn and I will not be able to move. No one is better, because now both of our emotions have clashed. Right now, we can no longer have any type of conversation. So that was the main thing that I think. And then two, with the patience part, when you asked about like kind of like trying to understand people better, I think that is so important. Like, whenever we understand, or whenever we feel those emotions, whenever we feel like, oh my God, they're attacking me, or oh my God, they're doing something completely wrong, the wrong way, I need to teach them. That is not the way to do it. I think anytime you're short with somebody or impatient with somebody, it's because you're not willing, or you're not interested in what they have or what they're going through. Like, one of the big things that I really appreciated in therapy, and I even told my therapist this, was like understanding what my actions, or understanding where my actions originated, started getting me thinking about like, damn, like, holy shit, I really don't know myself. So that means I really don't know anybody else. Like, whenever I'm talking to you, even, right? We're real longtime friends. Whenever there is a misalignment, or there is an argument, or a disagreement, who am I to just start like taking stances, making assumptions about you when I have no clue who you are? I barely know who I am, and I'm just gonna start drawing conclusions as to who you are. Once you accept that you don't know, and you actually are interested in other people, I feel like that's a huge key, a huge kind of life hack into actually experiencing way more patience and having way more productive conversations.
Amen, Kevin. That was some really insightful points that got me thinking. It's like, anytime an emotion is great in a lot of ways, but especially when you're arguing, anytime you start to let emotion take over instead of logic, neither side gets better. Both sides become more entrenched in their own point. And I think that's why we're seeing so much polarization in America, the United States today, because people are just watching shit that feeds into their echo chamber, tells them more and more what they want to hear. They don't consider the other side. And then everyone's worse off from this. You know, I've heard it said that the biggest threat to our democracy is not foreign interference. And I do think there's definitely some foreign interference going on. It's not realizing that whether you're a Republican or Democrat, we're all citizens of the United States, and we should all be working together, not attacking the other side because you disagree with them super passionately and you start letting your emotions get the best of you. That's not how you solve shit. That's not how you fix things. And that is why I'm not even going to bring it back to Bitcoin.
Not yet. But I'll take it real quick. Just touching on emotion and logic. There was a quote. It was from another therapist back in college. And she told me that wisdom is the balance of rationale and emotion. When we are on either extreme, we risk not understanding the opposite side. If I'm too emotional, I will never understand the rational side. If I'm too rational, I won't understand the emotional side. So wisdom, right? Ability to actually progress in your life, proudly progress through your life, is having that balance. Being able to process your emotion. This is honestly like a stoic ideology. Like, process your emotions. You actually do feel your emotions. You don't exactly immediately respond, but you process your emotions, and then you decide the most logical way to proceed from having those emotions. Is it logical to, when I feel when somebody tells me that they are not vaccinated, to respond and say, oh, you are racist and misogynistic. I think that is fully emotional, because walk me through the mindset, walk me through the steps you took to define that, to define me as that. And then we can see, maybe you're right, but but I really do believe things like that, those type of what is it, conclusive responses, just show just a lack of being able to separate or parse out your emotions from your logic.
Yeah, amen. And another point you had was the importance of learning and knowing yourself. First and foremost, loving yourself, getting to know yourself, understanding yourself. That's not an easy task. And I think in today's society of everything and everyone vying for your attention, that's on your smartphone, it's so hard to take the time to reflect internally and get to know yourself and start to love yourself. And I think it leads to a lot of toxic ass relationships, because people, it is kind of, but it's almost sad. Like, people so often look to others to validate themselves, look to others for recognition, look to others to lead a good life. And I just finished Atlas Shrugged last night. Great book. It took me forever to finish. But the biggest takeaway, and it kind of goes back to Ayn Rand's philosophy of objectivism, is that your happiness is dependent on yourself. The second you start putting your happiness on someone else and your need above their needs because you want to be happy based on what they can give you, that's bad. That's evil. That's wrong. That's just wrong, in my opinion. I don't think that is right to try and I have a girlfriend. I love her to death, and she makes me happy in many ways. But I truly believe that in order to have a lasting, meaningful, sustained relationship, I need to love myself first. I need to do things that make me happy. And then, and I go back and forth because, like, I've heard, my dad's told me, he's like, when you're in a relationship with someone, like, and you get married, at that point, you got to start putting them before you. But I think before you can even get to that point, you need to put yourself first. And it's different once you have a family, once you settle down.
Hey, yeah, Brad, life has a bunch of, contradictions. Like, I feel like, I mean, the big thing that I've felt with just like trying to understand all these like big quotes. I mean, if you read, like, what was it? My friend was telling me about 52 rules to life or something like that.
By Jordan Peterson? No.
That's 12 rules to live by, I think now.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
but I think it was, I don't know. Anyways, what I'm saying is there's a lot of quotes that contradict each other, right? And what we're starting to realize is that there is no one size fits all. There is no one way, one lane that you hop in and you're going to be great all the time. If anything, we should stay away from having that kind of binary good, bad, evil. Like, you know what I mean? If we get stuck in that binary way of looking about life, where things are always objectively good or things are always objectively bad, we kind of confine ourselves to one way of looking at the world. We are only good, or our version of good, or we are only bad, our version of bad, and we don't really see the spectrum of life. And when we're locking ourselves out of that, if you're not even exploring, if you're not even being shown how amazing and how amazingly unique every single moment of the world is, then your life just becomes monochrome. It just becomes black and white. And that's not cool. My favorite color is blue. I don't get to experience blue if I just looking at the world black and white. Oh, fuck that. I'd rather have a life with rainbows and shit.
Kevin, I think that's so key. And now I'm ready to relate it back to Bitcoin.
Okay.
but you talked about how, like, you can't have life as binary, or you ignore all the beautiful colors in between. If you just got white and black, you miss all the incredible stuff in between. And I think that's where I am personally with Bitcoin, because I've come to the conclusion Bitcoin's a GOAT. Bitcoin is the only cryptocurrency that can become a global reserve currency without being corrupted. And I realize that, and I preach that. And I truly believe that based on everything I've learned so far. But at the same time, like I talked about with you, I use US dollar coin because Bitcoin is volatile right now. It's being priced for the first time. And, I'm super excited to come visit you and go to the Atlanta Bitcoin conference in October. And I paid for that in Bitcoin. I'm proud to say, like, hell yeah, I use Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. That's pretty cool. I bought a ticket in Bitcoin. But for the majority of stuff, I can't go to Dunkin' Donuts up the road and pay in Bitcoin yet. I got to use US dollars. So I love the fact that Circle allows me to use US dollar coin on my Coinbase debit card, and back to the centralized system. I got to trust people like Coinbase and Circle to make sure that, like, I got to trust these third parties to make sure when I swipe my card, it's going to work. But I'm grateful that I can inevitably get even more Bitcoin back from the cash rewards I get, or the crypto rewards I get from spending my US dollar coin on the Coinbase debit card. So I think that's just such a key point. Don't look at things binary. Realize there's a spectrum in between. And the better you can get as a human being at realizing everyone has an agenda, everyone has biases, and taking stuff with a grain of salt, trying to see through the BS, and then making an educated decision, I think the better off we'll be in life, and as human beings overall.
Absolutely. I mean, what was there's another thing I was thinking about, but I mean, like, why would I actively restrict myself from just learning new things? Like, I think when we tie it all the way back to the initial question of like, how have you been able to stay positive or stay happy throughout the pandemic? The big thing for me was like finding things that I want to learn or get fully immersed in. It sounds like for you, it's been the rabbit hole. It's been going down crypto, which is amazing. I hear the passion coming out from you. That's just one way to like kind of feel happy, feel fulfilled through learning, right? The thing is learning. For me, I've been big on chess. You know, I'm a huge chess geek. But took some time for me to just like honestly like get more in touch with like my inner child. The ways I get in touch with it is, and this is what I wanted to get to. When we talk about the idea of loving yourself, I feel like it's been so cliched that people just say, yeah, I love myself. That's just like, what do you mean you love yourself? Like, I love myself. Like that. What do you mean? What do I mean? The big thing here is the best way to communicate love, at least in my eyes, is action. What actions are you taking to actually love yourself? Are you just saying it? Are they just words? Which is like, even those are powerful, right? Just saying that you love yourself is powerful. But actions make it concrete, make it real. If you are only saying that you love yourself and you're not taking any actions towards yourself, you are taking other actions that you think are just actions, but are actually completely shitting on yourself. You are not loving yourself. You are putting that secondary. You're taking those actions that are filled with love and putting them on the back burner because other things are more important. And when you say that those other things are more important, are you really loving yourself by not putting yourself up there, by not making the time for yourself? That's how I press anybody that doesn't take any action on loving themselves.
No, man, that's a great point. You know, you think like, and this is just a hypothetical, I'm not saying I have friends doing this. You know, I crushed a run this morning and I didn't have a buddy hit me up, but say like I had a buddy who was like, yo, come over and play video games. And I had texted him like, hey man, I'm actually going to crush a run. I'm doing a pod later with one of my best friends. Like, sorry. And he's like, oh, wow, you fucking selfish prick. That did not happen. But like the idea, like in any person, a lot of times you're going to have friends or colleagues or coworkers or whatever who try and get you to do something. And sometimes loving yourself is making the selfless decision to go for a run or go exercise or go down a rabbit hole or do whatever makes you happy, and realize that and that being said, some people, partying is their thing. They love doing that and they get a kick out of it, and they get a kick out of socializing. And I think, like you're saying, it's about understanding and then taking action to do things that you know will make you genuinely happy, even if it means that you don't get to spend time with someone who wants your attention. Loving yourself a lot of times can be making the selfish choice to take care of yourself rather than do something to appease someone else, even though they might try and guilt trip you or pressure you into doing said thing.
No, absolutely. I connecting it again, this whole conversation is just going in circles. I love it. There was moments where if you have no clear understanding of who you are, then you're just going to go and do whatever other people want to do, right? Once you define who you are and how you spend your time, then it's much easier to set those boundaries, right? Much easier to say no to things or yes to other things. But as we continue on through life and we go on without any definitions, it's okay. I think it's okay to have that compassion and say, hey, I'm still figuring myself out, still figuring it out. That's why I'm going and exploring all these different ways. I love that mentality. I've lived that mentality. But it's felt so much better when I have that control, a little bit of control. My calendar is my calendar. I do, for the most part, whatever the fuck I want to do. And I'm very intentional with how I pick my time. But at the same time, still having that flexibility, right? It's that balance of, one, I have those moments to myself that I know and I commit to myself, as well as the moments that I just have open from 9 p.m. to whatever on a weekend. If y'all trying to hang out, let's go, let's run it. I'm open to it. And other times where I actually taking the initiative to have that leadership in your social life. But this is all about understanding who you are and balancing that out with all the people around you.
Amen. It's all about figuring it out for yourself and then making decisions accordingly. Like you said, it's
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big circle. Like I said, it's great. It's an incredible feat of science we're able to make one. It's just let people make their own decisions. We're all trying to figure it the hell out, but human beings are also incredibly intuitive and bright creatures who have done some amazing things despite also doing some dark things. We've done some really incredible things as people. And I'll say it, I'm grateful as hell to Satoshi Nakamoto to have the humility to create this decentralized piece of software that I think can change the world for the better and allow anyone to bank themselves without having a third party who inevitably puts all their sunken costs onto you, the consumer. Mm-hmm. And that's how you relate it back to Bitcoin.
That's how you relate it back to
Bitcoin. Well, Kevin, I'll say, man, I really am so grateful you got me to start this podcast. I love taking the time to speak with friends like you, various others I've had on this podcast. And I always like to end it by asking a question. And I'll go first because I know you said you weren't ready when we started this. But for those who don't know, Kevin and I met at Tufts University in 2016, and we were both massive at the time. Not that we're small now, but like we were some units back then. And we were in this tiny little bedroom in South Hall at Tufts, called Haskell, right? Or no, what's South called now? What's the actual Harleston Hall? It was called South when we first moved in room 360. So my question to you is, what was your favorite memory from the GOAT room 360?
Oh man, which Super Bowl, right? Which one?
Wait, for those who don't know, the Super Bowl was a Madden game that Kevin and I would always play. Of course, I think I was what 2-1 in the Super Bowls. Is that how it is?
I mean, that's only because there was one where we just played one game. I remember that fondly, or not fondly. No, I mean, I was actually thinking about that on a plane ride back to LA. Like thinking about like literally how would I spend my years, and there was a couple memories that stood out, not all great. There was one specifically for me, and honestly, I don't think maybe we opened up about it, but it was honestly just me. There was a moment where I think you were out doing something, and it was late at night, and during the time I was very like into weed, right? So there was just like so much weed on a desk, and I was feeling very emotional at the time. There was things that were going on in my love life, things that were going on in my family life, things that were going on in sports, right? Just because I wasn't playing football, I was getting ready to do track, but I didn't really like get along with some of the people, whatever. All those moments I felt like were hitting me really, really hard. And for some reason, I really wanted to go to weed. I really wanted to go to drugs or alcohol to go hide myself from what was going on. I think my grandpa had just died. That's what it was. And I was so afraid. I was so afraid that I felt like I was losing control. I felt like I was like going down this rabbit hole of like drugs, alcohol, women, basically all the different vices to distract myself from my emotions. And that night I didn't smoke. That night I took the stance to just be like, you know what, I'm just going to go to sleep, like, which was actually really hard. I sat down in this chair. It was that comfy chair. You remember the white fluffy chair that we had for a little bit? Yeah. But I was sitting in that chair looking out, it's winter, looking out at like outside the window, for about like 30 to 40 minutes, just like in my feels, and really like trying my hardest not to go down drugs, not to go hit somebody up, not to go get some alcohol or something.
Mhm.
And it was after that moment, like after taking that stance, is when I actually started going to therapy. It was after that moment where I was just like, you know what, I need to stop going to all these other avenues to avoid this shit and just actually deal with it. So that was my fondest memory of 360. I need to hear your answer now too. I mean, I'll come up with my own question, but I want to hear your answer.
So many ways to take it.
I know. I took a real emotion. I took it real deep. I could have taken it a whole other way. I mean, there was the Super Bowl where Brady came back, right? That was insane.
Well, that was at Pasco. That was our sophomore year. That wasn't even Room 360.
I think that was Room 360 route.
No, because the Eagles won in the Super Bowl 2018. And at that point, the 2017-2018 school year, we were sophomores, pretty sure.
I know, but the Brady Atlanta.
Oh, you're right. You're right. That was freshman year. Yep. Nope. You're right.
Everybody came over to our room at halftime, and then like I remember, just Tom was like, "Yo, I think it could work. I think they might have it." And then we had stacked. It ended up being like 8 football players in one room.
There were so many great memories, and it's hard to pinpoint one. I'll say I think the night we watched Clockwork Orange together, all of us were like, and it was. I remember thinking too. My grandma told me the first time she watched that movie, how she literally was like sick to her stomach, like she was. I don't want to say like what's the word? Traumatized. Like she wasn't she was very close to being traumatized. Wasn't no serious, but like she was very distressed. Like that film was very powerful to her, and while it was powerful to all of us, I think it was a huge realization how desensitized we become. And also, man, just like sitting with the boys, watching a movie, like, there's memes like, they always say, like, you never know when you're in the best of times looking back. And it really was a special thing, man. Just, I feel very fortunate that I got to go to the school I did, make the relationships I did, people like you, the likes, especially on
Marcus
the football
Edmonds,
team.
I think, was watching that movie with us randomly.
Yeah, there was a ton of people in there. I want to say Mark,
Pierce,
Hall, Pierce might have been in there. All the boys. Yeah, so I'll say that was off the top of my head, like on the spot. There were some other moments, but that's between me and you.
On this pod, yeah.
You don't need to share on the pod.
Why is it throw up on the floor? It's okay. Doesn't matter.
Did someone get shot inside the bathroom? There's like blood red everywhere. What the hell's going on?
Oh God, yeah. Enough of that. Okay, my question for you: can you connect Dr. Stone to Bitcoin? To specifically the ledger. I wanted to do the the ledger.
It's all proof of work at the end of the day, right?
Okay.
So in Dr.
Stone,
great anime series for those who haven't watched, highly recommend it. It's on HBO Max if you have that. And in the show, these people basically get liquefied in this rock thing for like 4,000 years. And when they start to break out, the world is like, just there's no civilization, right? It's just like hunters and gatherers of this. Like there's a few people, but it's really there's like no electricity, no like civilization is in the very beginning of civilization all over again. And this guy who breaks out is a brilliant scientist, like a high school whiz kid, and he uses science to kind of restore civilization, get people back up. And I've seen some things like it's like those coins people make. I'll put a picture of it if you're watching the YouTube version of this podcast. And like those coins that people literally had to make and mold, and then they use them as unit of accounts. Because what is money besides a ledger to show who has what, right? To be able to transfer value back and forth and to know that your work, your time was valued at something. So the people use, and they don't really get too much into money in Dr. Stone because they're doing other stuff with science. But that is the idea, like a system of account that can't be manipulated, that can't be screwed with. I learned the other day too that all cryptography is I wrote this down, communication in the presence of adversaries. So understanding that being able to give value back and forth, knowing that it can't be manipulated, messed with, duplicated, increase the supply of. And in essence, that is what Bitcoin is. Since Satoshi Nakamoto walked away, no one knows who the pseudonymous or anonymous creator is. No one has special privileges. Michael Saylor's in the news for constantly buying up all the Bitcoin. He's got like over 100,000. And if Bitcoin was on a proof of stake system where people who staked their Bitcoin and then earned a tiny bit of yield on it, but also were selected at random to add blocks, and you think inside the blocks are all the transactions. If we had a proof of stake system, you'd think Saylor would be getting blocks all the time because he has a massive chunk. He's got like 100,000 something Bitcoin out of the 21 million total. But because it's proof of work, the network considers me, I don't know if powerful is the right word, but I can do anything Saylor does. I mean, he has way more Bitcoin, so he could spend more technically, but Saylor has no special privileges as compared to myself or anyone for that matter. And that's what makes it so powerful. A ledger that no one can debase, no one can make more of. If you want Bitcoin that you don't buy from an exchange, you got to use energy, proof of work. You got to spin up an ASIC, an application-specific interface computer that is just designed to try and put out like a million hash functions or, guess the answer. And then once it gets it, it can add a block with all these random transactions. It's just proof of work. And that's kind of what Dr. Stone is like. What's the dude's name with the green hair, the main character? I'm
blanking, but I know this is the main guy.
He's the main guy. The main guy. Yeah, Dr. Stone. He literally uses his knowledge to create all these things. They do the work. And I think that's why Bitcoin's such a beautiful system, because anyone and the price action, I guess you could argue if you wanted, like, oh, it's like a Ponzi scheme, sure, but is our current money not like a Ponzi scheme? Like the banks are lending out money we deposit for a yield. I mean, there's a shit ton of trust in the current system, and I don't want another financial collapse. I hope we're far from a financial collapse, but I do think we just keep seeing these debt bubbles at some point pop. And I'm very hopeful that Bitcoin can be a more fair, honest, better system where people around the world can transact without having to trust a third party, having to pay for the cost of that third party, and use it to advance civilization to the to the best civilization we can, become a multiplanetary species, advance humanity rather than have the worst of humanity come out, like I think a lot of US sanctions and stuff affects citizens very harshly in a lot of less developed countries. And we're kind of shielded from it because we're here in the US, and I don't have examples but I think a lot of policies around the world made by leaders affect a lot of innocent people because I think our money in a lot of ways has become corrupted and centralized, and it's not optimizing for the best of humanity. It's optimizing for growth at all costs, which includes selling shitty consumer products, putting a bunch of hormone in the food, pushing various things that I'm not going to get into. So I don't.
This is where I was thinking you were going to go for Dr. Stone. There's two main characters, right? There's one with the gray hair, and then there's a really buff guy who's just like leading all the warriors, right? And both have two different ways of wanting to rule the world. One wants one with scientific advance or science. What is it? What's he trying to do? He's trying to just have
have science create a prosperous society, get civilization back to where it was before. And the other guy wants to
power. It's just all
power. Have a world ruled by force, which can't really scale. But at least he knows, like, he wouldn't have to deal. He's salty because in the old world there were tanks and kind of people to keep him. There was war. There was military to keep him in check. And now that they're kind of with sticks and stones, he's like, I'm the most powerful, and I want a world where I can rule and optimize for what I think is best. And that's what's so important. Like we said, people are going to disagree. And rather than getting emotional, Bitcoin takes the answer out of it and says, it's just logic, baby. The code is going to do what the code wants.
It's just math.
I don't give a shit what your gender is. I don't give a shit what your religion is. I don't give a shit what your politics are. I don't give a shit if you're the most attractive or ugliest person on this planet. It's just math. It's just going to do what it's programmed to do. And the sooner people realize this, that the quicker it can become adopted, and I think the better off the world will be. I mean, look at plastic credit cards. 60 years ago, people were like, "What the hell is this?" And 60 years later, we're still using them. And the only difference is, rather than a decentralized open ledger anyone can audit, we're using these privatized banks. At least here in the U.S., there's a lot of places that don't have the financial infrastructure, but here in the U.S., we're just trusting the bank and their ledgers that it's right. I mean,
Exactly.
that's what we're doing. Well, Kevin, it's been an absolute pleasure. To anyone who listened to this podcast, thank you. I'm going to start leaving Google Forms at the end of these, so you can tell me what you liked, what you disliked, where I can get better. And yeah, we'll have to have you back on, Quiz. Thanks again for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it.